On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the future is now for designing your own personal AI assistant.
You get an agentic AI agent first time you join the federal government, and it's with you for your career. Stays with you while you're there, helps you with all of your resumes and jobs and HR, answers all your questions, but it's your specific agentic AI tied to your unique email and ID.
Former OPM CIO Melvin Brown on FedGov Today in just a moment. First, though, on FedGov Today TV this week, how and when you can move money around during the shutdown. Former IRS Commissioner and former OMB Controller Danny Werfel will tell you what's cool and what's not, and former DHS Chief Procurement Officer Soraya Correa explains the most important things to tell your team after the shutdown ends. You can watch the show on the FedGov Today YouTube channel anytime, and it's available on our website at fedgovtoday.com. Federal leaders who have lived through previous government shutdowns say there's a chance to build back because of the 2025 shutdown. Former NASA Chief Data Officer Ron Thompson told you why on Tuesday's FedGov Today podcast. You can find that in the archives at fedgovtoday.com. Melvin Brown II's Vice President at the Contract Administration Network International. He's former Chief Information Officer at the Office of Personnel Management. Does that make sense, what Ron says about moving forward, not just coming back and restarting the same stuff as before, but that things will look different to the people that return to work? Melvin, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Francis. When federal leaders return after the shutdown, they're not just walking back into their offices. They're walking back into a landscape that has shifted. I mean, if you look at 2013, you had the operational disruptions, systems may be out of sync. During the 2013 shutdown, the IRS had over $1.2 million verification request backlog, delayed mortgage loans. And so it's not going to be the same. And so there is an opportunity, though, for federal leadership, not just expect just a restart, but a recovery. One that requires empathy, agility, and strategic triage. So they should start to think about the momentum that's been lost. And now that we're here in this new space and the ground is shifted, how could we do it differently going forward?
How does one leverage that opportunity to its fullest extent to do things differently moving forward? I understand there's going to be a period of restart where you just kind of make sure everybody's back on the team, everybody is back engaged in the mission and so on. But I imagine it's a pretty short turnaround to then leap to that idea of leveraging an opportunity to really do things differently.
Well, I mean, I like what's going on at OPM, where they're re-looking at the back office HR systems across the enterprise. I think that's a great place to start. Rather than renewing a bunch of contracts that we've always had before, hey, let's take a strategic pause and think about, how can we do this differently and get a better outcome now that we're here.
It seems to me, too, that agencies are well positioned to do that, because just about everybody, I talked to you about this when you were at OPM. I've talked to other agency people all across both the civilian side and the DoD side, and pretty much everybody, when they talk about modernization, IT transformation efforts, talks about revisiting the business process, reevaluating the business process before they do the modernization transformation efforts. So it strikes me people are already kind of in that mode, right, Melvin?
Yeah, that is true, Francis. One of the things that we've talked about, specifically around modernization, and I talked about this last week, is that this consolidation that we're trying to do, everybody thinks they're a snowflake. When we're not, at OPM, you're hiring, and we're hiring all across the federal landscape. And so having a common framework for hiring, having, consistency around hiring, giving everybody the same experience, having one centralized place for data such that you can make, strategic decisions across the enterprise, I think it's a good thing. And so I think if we could, maybe look at what the commercial sector has done and then adjust our policies to meet the technology, and rather than trying to force the technology to meet outdated policies and processes.
That concept strikes me maybe as the hardest part of all of this, though, Melvin, because the government has thought of itself from an enterprise perspective as a snowflake for a long time. We're different than commercial. And then individual agencies, as you mentioned, think they're different than all the other ones. So that seems to me to be the most difficult thing, because that's a culture shift, that's a mind shift, and not necessarily just putting out a new memo and all of a sudden everybody follows the concepts of that new memo.
Don't disagree with y'all, Francis. And I've always said before, with technology transformation, the problem has not been tech. It's always been the things around tech. We need to modernize the business of IT. And that starts with relooking at the business processes, relooking at outdated policies, fixing the budget process. Because with all of what we're doing now, if there's no funding for the tail of all of this, once we do modernize, then we will have wasted the time and opportunity that we have. So we've got to modernize the business of IT, and there's got to be an enterprise strategy to do that across the federal enterprise.
What is the right thing for CIOs to do until that enterprise strategy comes for the entire federal government? What can they do within their own organizations to establish or reinforce that idea of an enterprise-wide policy that really has teeth behind? It's one thing for the CIO to say, okay, we're going to consolidate all this, the strategy and so on, but it's another thing for it to actually happen, for people to listen to that person.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we did when we decided to create our Cloud Center of Excellence, when we consolidated all of our assets into the cloud, was that we created a CCOE. We brought the lines of business in, and we set policies and procedures about what was going to the cloud, what wasn't going to the cloud, and re-looked at the business. So we did a application rationalization of our systems, and then determined what was going, what was not going, what needed to be changed, what needed to be refactored, what needed to be turned off. And so I think you've got to do an assessment of what is something that could be an enterprise service for the enterprise, and then determine what are the true snowflakes, specifically for the lines of business and the business that you're in. But looking at your organization, how much of your back office support is really a snowflake? How much different are you hiring or managing budgets than your lines of business? Probably not much, because the HR rules and the budgeting rules haven't changed in years. And so the real snowflakes are the business that you're in, and what does that system look like? But for back office support, I think it's a no-brainer. For
a lot of that back office stuff, do you see an opportunity for agencies to either collaborate together to kind of share the burden of the operations of those systems, or maybe for the federal government to finally move to what it said it's wanted to do for 10, 15, maybe more years than that, which is to have 2 or 3 government-wide HR systems, financial management systems, all of that?
I like that idea, because it creates competition. And so if we've got a couple of, case in point, we're moving to skill-based hiring. And so if we've got a couple of skill-based hiring platforms that, are best in breed in the industry, put those 2 up, offer those government-wide, and let them compete and continue to keep competition going. Same with the HR systems. If we're gonna do that across the enterprise, just like they did with JEDI over at the DoD, everybody got a chance to play in that space. The best of the best got a chance to compete. And so now the DoD gets to leverage, whatever cloud they feel meets their mission, and industry has a hand in that, and they get a chance to compete for that work. I think that's a perfect model for HR and some other things, is to not just go with a single vendor and get vendor lock, but to create an opportunity for multiple vendors to be able to compete and do that work.
That's a really good reference, Melvin, because you got in the JWC contract, you got 4 vendors there. You're right. You have competition among all the big guns, and somebody in the department can choose whatever they want among each of the 4 biggest companies. They can buy it off the contract. It's easy to do, and it's working apparently well enough that DISA is going to do a second generation of the contract instead of going, well, this didn't really work out, so we have to kind of start from scratch. So apparently that idea, there's a demonstration of how that concept works. How different are some of the other applications that agencies use from just buying cloud that maybe the model would have to be tweaked, or other provisions would have to be made?
Francis, I think the other piece of that is to have a common data strategy. So you come up with a set of data standards that you would use, and then you make sure that you've got an open data standard such that you can get the data that you need when you need it, and it comes in a consistent format, such that, if you wanted to create a data warehouse or a data lake of consolidating that data from various vendors, you can do that. And that's just one example.
Are AI solutions sufficiently advanced to be able to manipulate agencies' data to fit whatever the standards are for that system that you just proposed?
I'd say agentic AI especially is on the rise, and I think that it is starting to be mature enough to do at least some basic back office functions. I don't want to be vendor specific, but I've seen some examples of, where the agentic AI is actually going off doing low level work and coming back in an HR department. And I say, wow, that's pretty intriguing. And to say that it can't be done, I think it's being done in pockets. And so somebody would have to bring that together, put a wrap around and create an enterprise strategy for it. But I think it's a phenomenal concept. I said, one of the visions that I had at OPM was, you get an agentic AI agent first time you join the federal government, and it's with you for your career. And it stays with you while you're there, helps you with all of your resumes and jobs and HR, answers all your questions. But it's your specific agentic AI tied to your unique email and ID that stays with you through your federal career. I think we can get there, and I think that's where things are going. The other thing that I'll share with you where I think we need to reimagine is we've got to move away from org charts and start looking at work charts. Looking at work from the standpoint of what is the human going to do, and then what is agentic AI or AI going to do, and then that's how you start to segregate your work based on the things that only humans can do, and then hire for that, but then roll out AI in places where it would be best served to do that work.
That concept of having an agent that sticks with you for your whole career is fascinating to me. And I wonder if that's tied somehow to your federal identity, so that, say, I'm working with you at OPM for a while, and then I go to OMB on a detail, and then after that, I find an assignment at the agriculture department that I think is good for me, and that follows me around. I have not heard folks talk about that before, Melvin, and as you describe it, it sounds entirely doable with the technology that we have today.
Yeah, all you need is access to the data. And so to your point, you tie it to that person's ID, and conceptually what would happen is, let's say, hey, Francis, you got annual training coming up this year. Here are a list of courses that you've got to take. You want me to sign up for them? Hey, Francis, it's open season for your health benefits. These are your choices from last year. Do you want to re-enroll? Hey, Francis, you've been in this job for a year now. You've met the minimum requirements. Here's some recommended jobs for you going forward. Hey, Francis, you got a satisfactory on your performance plan. Here's some areas that they think you needed to improve in. Here's some recommended trainings that you want to take. Just something as basic as that. You'd have your own HR professional with you tied to your identity for your career.
That really sounds revolutionary, Melvin. When we get past this shutdown, I want to sit down and talk about what that looks like moving forward, and how agencies can start to move to that. It's really great to talk to you, my friend. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, my friend.
You can read more about rebuilding after the shutdown on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. The FedGov Today podcast is back tomorrow. What to do tactically to succeed when you turn on your agency after the shutdown ends. Former federal CIO Suzette Kent is here to tell you about that. If you don't want to miss that show, you can follow the FedGov Today podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on the FedGov Today YouTube channel, or on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. I'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening.